All right, good afternoon, Marlins fans. Welcome to another episode of the Marlins Prospects Pod. My name is David Fernandez. I'm here, as always, with Joe Frisaro from manon2nd.com. We are going to talk to you today all about what's going on with Marlins prospects, some of the bigger names in the system. We're going to touch on those here today. We've got some props for one of the most exciting prospects that the Marlins have in their pipeline. But we're going to start today with a discussion about the MLB draft, which is literally right around the corner. The draft this year for Major League Baseball is happening later than normal. It's happening in July, and it's going to start July 17th. They kind of coincided the draft with the All-Star game, which is going on in Los Angeles, and obviously the Marlins have plenty of representation, or they will have plenty of representation out in California this year. But we're going to get to all of that stuff here today. Joe, how you doing?
Doing well, David. I'm really excited about this podcast because it's a lot to unpack, a lot to address, and I think we got some really, really good stuff on the draft. Like you say, Marlins, of course, are going to be picking 6. We're going to kind of look at that top of the draft. We're going to talk about the Drew Joneses. We're going to talk about the college bats in this draft. We're going to hit on some state of Florida guys to keep an eye on. If they don't go in the top, some could be going in the first round or the high rounds. And then we're gonna hit on the system and look at some of the past draft picks the Marlins had. We're gonna give some props to Andrew Painter. We're gonna talk about him, the pitcher from Calvary Christian. But so we got a lot to do. Let's kind of get right into it, David. And I did want to kind of talk about, it's a pretty exciting draft because it seems like the highest end, those top 2, 3, 4 picks could be high school guys. Marlins pick 6, and then there's this wave of really talented college hitters. And, this draft seems like for sure you could just take pitcher out of the equation for the Marlins. And then it's just what bats are going to be available and where do you go? I got some intel on some of these guys and, just kind of your reaction as you kind of handicap what the draft's going to look like.
Yeah, as you said, the Marlins are in a really good position with this draft to land a really high-end prospect. They have the number 6 pick. They also have the number 46 pick, which is going to land them another decent prospect, as we shift into the second round. And then, just in total, they have 20 picks. They'll stock the system with plenty of exciting guys. And we can't dismiss some of those guys that come in later because, as we talked about last week, Josh Simpson, he's one of the highest and fastest rising pitchers in the system. The Marlins picked him in the 32nd round in 2019. So we can't just dismiss the back end, but obviously we're going to focus here on the front end of things. The Marlins are picking 6th overall. They're picking 46 as well. And we've seen a number of college players, mostly college players, have been mocked to the Marlins in mock drafts all over the internet, MLB.com, ESPN.com, The Athletic, all these different outlets. Many of them are sort of choosing for the Marlins from this same sort of crop of players. And those guys are Jacob Berry from LSU, who is a first baseman and an outfielder, very solid bat. Another solid college bat, we've talked about him in the past, catcher Kevin Parada from Georgia Tech. There's been talk recently of Brooks Lee, a shortstop from Cal Poly. And then most recently, a name that's sort of gotten into the conversation for the Marlins, although this might be maybe the biggest reach of the bunch, is Gavin Cross, an outfielder from Virginia Tech. So those are sort of the 4 college bats that seem to be bunched in with the Marlins more often than not. And then the high school bat that has been associated with the Marlins is second baseman Tamar Johnson, a high school out of Mays High School in Georgia. He's somebody that probably should go high. He's probably a top 5 pick, but there's talk of maybe him sliding down the draft and maybe the Marlins don't pass on somebody with that level of talent because Tamar Johnson, he has one of the best hit tools in this crop. But again, Berry, Parada, Lee, those are kind of the names that we're hearing most with the Marlins. Do you have anything on any of those guys, Joe?
Yeah, I do. And let's start. I'm going to start first with 1, 2, 3. Because you got the Baltimore Orioles, who apparently are leaning toward Drew Jones, son of Andrew Jones, to be 1-1 center fielder like his dad. I saw him play in a perfect game event last October. And if he doesn't go 1, he's certainly to go 2. Then the guy who's number 2 on a lot of lists, Jackson Holiday. We addressed him, son of Matt Holiday, another high school kid, lefty bat. And then Elijah Green. This guy is my kind of personal favorite. I saw him play a year ago against, I saw him take Andrew Painter to the wall over at Calvary Christian with a double. This guy is a super athletic player. His father's a former football player in the NFL. I think he was a 2-time Pro Bowler with as a tight end. Yep. And Green is the guy who I think, I've heard from people I really respect and trust. He could be slipping because of the concerns about the swing and miss rate. But I talked to I talked to multiple people who have put their eyes on these guys and are having say on where they're getting drafted. And another guy just swears by him. Like if the Marlins had the choice between Green or Tamar Johnson, who I also saw last year at the Perfect Game event in Jupiter in October. Again, yes, a great lefty bat, more of a middle infielder, could be shorter at second. But of those two, I asked, who did you want? And overwhelmingly it was Green. And I asked, are you concerned about what the concerns are, which is the swing and miss is going to be too high? And basically was told, big power guys in the big league strike out. A lot of guys in the big league strike out, but we're talking 40 homer and just a physical presence that this guy could develop into a monster type of toolsy player. So he would probably be my wish list if I'm, if the Marlins somehow could get Elijah Green at 6, don't pass on him. But to the point on the college bats, now would I go with Tamar Johnson or Jacob Berry? I got somebody I reached out to last night about Jacob Berry. Interesting player out of LSU. A little background: he is at Arizona State, I believe, or Arizona. Was that he transferred?
I don't remember.
Yeah, I think he transferred from Arizona, I believe, and we spent 1 year at LSU, switch hitting first baseman. I think they list him as third base, but I was told he can't play there. Only in a pinch. This guy's going to profile first base. Maybe you throw him in left field, but the word special hitter, and literally huge power from. Now this is what's interesting. Slightly better from the left side, but only because he gets more opportunities from person I saw him. This guy is going to bring super thunder to middle of your lineup. Mm-hmm. And then you could always be a first base DH type thing to get him. But you want that bat. Special, when I hear special bat and basically 60 plus power on an 80 scale, this guy is going to hit a lot of home runs, a lot of extra base hits, and a special hitter. He would be my mock. I would have him as the Marlins pick if it came down to Johnson or him. And I'd probably even take him over Brooks Lee, who's another, switch hitter, shortstop Kyle Poly. Now, admittedly, I'm just reading the reports. I didn't really talk to somebody who saw him, but but even a backup person I know who saw Jacob Berry was all in on him, saw him on Team USA a couple of years ago. So that would be my, I'm not going to say sleeper pick because he's been linked, but I would go with, let's put it this way. If the Marlins could get Elijah Green or Jacob Berry, it would be a very good first round or 6th pick, in my opinion.
Green would be incredibly exciting, obviously, because of the potential that he has, a fun tie to the Miami area. His dad, as you mentioned, NFL tight end, really, really talented player. He played with the Dolphins for 1 season, so it would be, a fun little connection there with Elijah Green. As far as Jacob Berry, as you said, one of the top college bats in this draft, but there are some significant questions on defense. So, does he profile as a DH? They're listed in some places, as you mentioned, as a third baseman, probably not that at all, maybe really a corner outfielder, so it'll be interesting to see where they go in that direction. A deep cut for Marlins fans here. The only other time the Marlins have drafted a guy out of LSU in the first round was Josh Booty, if you remember. He also played quarterback, so another football connection there, but he didn't really pan out for the Marlins in that regard. So if they take a guy like Jacob Berry, hopefully he has a better MLB career than Josh Booty, but it should be interesting. But there were a few other college bats there. I don't know if you want to touch on them. I mean, I know we've talked a lot about Kevin Parada. Did you want to mention anything more about
Yeah,
him?
just more because I do try to get as much input from as many people. I think the last time I talked about him, I downgraded him on my board, at least for that high of a pick, because I was concerned about the bat. And then someone else I talked to who saw him loves the bat. So again, you talked about questionable defense on first base with Berry. There's questions if Parada is going to be an average to above average defensive catcher, which would kind of keep me away from him. You don't like to talk them down. You want the kid to go as high and make as much money and be as successful. But I think when you're splitting hairs and you have to do what's best for the organization, I probably am not going catcher right there. We talked about, Joey Bart was a Georgia Tech guy. He was a can't miss. And now he's in San Francisco, and there's serious questions whether he's even going to pan out. He started the year up. We saw him face the Marlins early on, but he's in AAA, and I think he's hitting about 200 there as well. Pro Bowl is different. We noted that. Don't fall totally in love with college numbers. I'm falling in love with players based on the evaluation of the player and the profile of the player, not just the statistical, background of the player. So Parada, again, if he falls their way, I know he's been matched in several mocks. Again, we if that's the call, that's the call. But I'm trusting that these offensive players we're mentioning, and that's not even a few of the bats you also mentioned, whether Brooks Lee or some of those other college bats you mentioned could fit there as well. I'm probably trying to get the most impactful hitter and worry about defense second, with this pick, because I think that's really where the Marlins lack. They, right now at the big league level, even at 3, 4, 5, and Cooper is going to the All-Star game. He's more of a 2 hitter right now. He isn't really providing superpower. He's just having a good, solid offensive season. But I'm looking for those 20, 30, 40 home run guys. And, that's really going to be a threat and make the middle of your lineup that much better. And from what we're talking about, I think Jacob Berry fits that mold, assuming Elijah Green isn't there.
Yeah, and we're going to talk a little bit more about, the Marlins' offensive struggles of late, plus who they have sort of in the pipeline in the upper levels of the system that might help them. We'll get to that a little bit later. Parada, as you mentioned, I mean, the Marlins are pretty well stocked with catching talent in the system right now. They took Joe Mack in the first round, competitive bounce pick last year. He's working his way back from a recent injury. So, still a lot of high upside there with Joe Mack. And then obviously we've talked quite a bit in some of our previous episodes about Paul McIntosh, who's doing really, really well at the AA level. And then obviously we've seen the emergence of Nick Fortes at both, AAA and then now at the major league level. So the Marlins seem to have some pretty good offensive talent and, at the catcher position. So it would be interesting if they selected him at number 6 overall when they have some of those other options available to them. But so we've been talking about.
David, let me mention one last thing. One thing I had in my notes I just saw. Sorry to interrupt. On Jacob Berry, the comp I got from one of my people was he's another Lance Berkman.
Oh, okay.
So, when you're talking about switch hitting first baseman type, that was the type of comp. And I think that's a pretty good one when you're talking about that versatile one. But I just wanted to get that before we segue to our next topic.
Yeah. Listen, if Berry has,
any of that.
If he has half the career that Lance Berkman had, I think the Marlins would be in good shape if he was with them. We've talked a lot about these college bats that have been sort of associated most notably with the Marlins throughout this mock draft season as we lead into the draft itself. But there's a bunch of talent from the South Florida area that we want to touch on as well. And one name that I wanted to get to before you sort of went through some of the guys that you've noticed, one name that's kind of moving up the draft boards is a local Miami kid. He went to Coral Park High School, and now he's a standout for Campbell University, which is, a smaller school, but still, he's a shortstop. Zach Neto's his name. He's the only the second player all time to win Big South Conference Player of the Year twice. Again, Miami native. He grew up as a Marlins fan. He's kind of getting up into that range, sort of mid-first round. The Marlins, it might be a reach for the Marlins to take him at 6, but this is a kid who has really sort of grown into his frame. He's now 6 feet. He's a decent sized kid. He hit 407 this year for Campbell University. 23 doubles, 15 homers, 50 RBI in 53 games. A really, really talented shortstop prospect that I would be thrilled, obviously, if some of these other names are gone. If Elijah Green is off the board, if Jacob Berry's off the board, I would almost rather the Marlins go with somebody like Zach Neto, who again grew up a Marlins fan, if they took somebody like him over maybe Parada or stuff like that. But so he's one of the local kids. And again, South Florida is a hotbed for talent, not just in baseball. We've seen it in football and so many other sports. But some of the other names from South Florida that have sort of stood out to you, Joe, that have caught your eye.
Yeah, left-hand pitcher Brandon Barea from American Heritage here in Plantation. He's the guy that was mocked to go very high, top 10. Looking more now like middle of the first round, but lefty, interesting because he's regarded by many as like the best high school lefty pitcher in the draft. And there's some competition for that as well, that distinction. Interesting, though, that Brandon, he kind of shut his season down. His prep season down a little early to get ready for the draft. This kid's a huge investment, so can't really blame him, if he felt that he was at an innings number and maybe Heritage wasn't, going as far as they do in years past. But Brandon Barea, people know him down here in Broward County. And also from South Florida. Now, let me first go with IMG, Jackson Ferris. Obviously, IMG is up in the, in the Tampa area. He's teammate of Elijah Green, left-handed pitcher, also projects in the top 20. So 2 Florida kids there, 1 local, 1 state. And then Sal Stewart from Westminster Christian, listed as a third baseman. I believe Sal's also committed to Vanderbilt. Apparently a big-time hitter, but, kind of a bigger body guy. They don't really know the position for him. Playing some third, probably play some first. I wouldn't, if he doesn't go in the top first or second round, then, the money probably wouldn't be there to entice him to sign. He'd probably just go to Vanderbilt, I believe, as his commit. And so Sal Stewart, I know his name is familiar to the baseball people that follow the prep scene. And those are a few others. But again, it's an exciting year for the state of Florida. And the draft's always fun, because, we're always going to, in years past, we've had Tristan Costas come out of here. A year ago, we had Andrew Painter, who I was wanting to get to because I threw his numbers out there because every now and then I go and look up Andrew Painter, the kid from, just to see what he's doing because he's just completely annihilating everybody he faces. He's 19. He was the 13th pick overall by the Phillies last year, Calvary Christian Academy last year, those who saw him play. 6'7", fastball up to 100, 102. I think I heard a scout said they saw him. Wipeout slider. Some people question that, whether the changeup is going to be there for him. He hasn't had to use it enough because he can dominate with 2 pitches. But, he does have, from what I understand, a really good changeup as well. But, in 46 and 2/3 innings, 79 strikeouts, a 1.74 ERA. I've noticed he got promoted to High A Jersey Shore. Now, there's a team for you, David, the Jersey Shore Blue Claws.
Oh boy.
And if you go to their website, they got some good merch there. And I may have to hit that button and buy something for a Blue Claw. But I'm sure he's there. He's hanging out the Jersey Shore house. He's got, Paulie and all those crazy Jersey Shore characters are probably there with him. But fun pitcher, and I bring him up again because a year ago we were talking about him as where would he fit. He wasn't there on the board for the Marlins, but people had him middle of the first. He went 13th. Some people didn't like him so much, but I think if you reset that draft and you were to throw everyone in there. There's some people I know that think he could be 1-1. And I know on some like Pipeline, I think has him in 50 or 60 overall. But there are people I talk to, I think he's a top 10 prospect right now in all of baseball. But again, local kid from Broward County here at Calvary Christian, and just wanted to bring him up. Any quick thoughts on him before we talk about, some of the Marlins minors?
Yeah, no, I mean, just a brilliant pitcher at the moment. He's 19 years old, as you mentioned, so really young. I mean, his tools, they jump off the screen. They jump, scouting reports, they jump off the page, so he's He's somebody that if the Phillies hang on to him and he eventually makes it to Philadelphia, he's somebody that the Marlins are going to have to deal with down the line, and probably not too far down the line the way that he's progressing. It'll be interesting to see, if a few years from now, 2-3 years down the road, we get an Andrew Painter, Yuri Perez matchup between the Marlins and the Phillies, who, both 19-year-old prospects, both incredibly talented young pitchers. So it'll be interesting to see that matchup down the line. We'll talk about Yuri as we sort of wrap up here today, but another 19-year-old that we wanted to bring up was the Marlins' first-round pick last year, and he's a guy that, again, if we sort of redid that draft, he had been expected to go earlier in the draft than he did. The Marlins picked 16th last year, and he ended up sliding to the Marlins. The Marlins picked him up and they signed him. Nowadays, if we redid that draft, he might actually slide past the Marlins because, of character concerns and things like that. We're talking, of course, of Kahlil Watson. He was the Marlins draft pick, and I'm going to show this clip because he hasn't played since July 1st, and this is what people are pointing to as the reason why.
Check swing. Did he go? He did for strike 2. Watson with the wave of the hand at Matt Wachowski did not care for that. And I never would care for that either if I was a left-handed hitter and the first base umpire said I didn't check my swing. How are they supposed to see? That one's always lost on me. 2-2 swing. And a miss. Strikeout for Diaz.
So in that clip, that was sort of the last appearance that Watson made before getting sat down by the organization. In that clip, you'll see he sort of makes a gesture towards the umpire down the first base line with his bat. Maybe like a gun, a shooting gesture, which, there's no place for something like that in the game of baseball or really anywhere. So there are some serious concerns about Watson, some character concerns, some maturity concerns. The Marlins have had issues, or Jupiter, I guess the organization and the Jupiter team specifically have sat him down for attitude issues throughout this first season. He's obviously a guy that has an incredible upside. 19 years old. He's listed as the number 3 prospect for the Marlins by MLB Pipeline. They have him as the number 51 prospect overall. So far this season for low A Jupiter, he's hitting .221. He's got a .646 OPS, 8 homers, 11 doubles, 35 RBI. He also has 12 steals. But the big concern from production perspective for Watson so far has been the strikeouts. We saw a strikeout in that clip that looked pretty bad. He has 99 strikeouts in his 252 plate appearances thus far. That is a 39.3 strikeout percentage. That is the 4th highest strikeout percentage in the Florida State League. And again, as you see, it's listed there. He hasn't played since July 1st for disciplinary reasons. It is an internal sort of discipline thing. The Marlins haven't officially suspended him or anything like that. He's still listed as active. So what do you have on Watson, Joe?
Yeah, this is just a sad story. It's like, you're wondering, you're hearing he's not coachable. You're hearing that there's clearly a disconnect, and it's sad because, from a lot of people I spoke to, that was the steal of the draft a year ago in people's eyes. I had people I highly respect said they would have taken him 1-1 with their team, and you just hope the young man can get it together and get on the same page with the team. There's that line of competitiveness, maturity on the field. You got to wonder how much his stats are being impacted by how he feels emotionally playing. If he feels like he's, I'm sure it does. And then is it compounding itself? The thing that you got to keep in mind, these players, especially high school players, haven't really dealt with much adversity because they probably just dominated their levels.
Yeah.
They dominated everything, dominated Little League and, all that other stuff and all the, travel to tournaments and showcase events. And then they come to pro ball and it's not always as easy. And it's this is your work. You're getting paid for it. Again, there's no place for the antics, and you just hope that the Marlins could address this. Are they going to seek to trade him? You hear those type of rumors, but clearly something's going on. I haven't been up to Jupiter yet. I need to get up there to try to get a little bit more of what I could, independently report on it. Just going with a lot of what you're hearing, and it isn't good. And it's a reminder, when a lot goes into, these departments that make these picks, and they look at everything and they check out the makeup of these players, and along with, there's a lot that goes into before a $4, $5, $6 million, bonus is thrown their way. And still, even when everyone does their due diligence, you still never know how people are going to react. Again, you just hope that Kahlil could kind of get it together and have a very productive career, especially with the Marlins. They made the investment, but clearly right now there's some internal things that the organization is going to have to come to grips with the player to resolve this thing.
Yeah, he's an elite prospect, and it would be a shame for him not to reach his ceiling, his potential. Obviously, a shame for him personally, and then a shame for the Marlins, who, as you said, have invested literally millions of dollars in him. It'll be interesting to see if this has any effect on the Marlins' thinking for the first round of this coming draft, because they've had some good history in the past with high schoolers, but more on sort of the pitching side of things. So do the issues that Watson has had. Sorry, I'm like fumbling over myself here. Do those issues mean the Marlins maybe absolutely go in the direction of an older college bat, who presumably might be a little bit more mature? I mean, you never know. It's different with every kid. And that's not to say that every high schooler is going to be a maturity issue. That's obviously not the case. But it'll be interesting if there's any sort of lingering effect with that. And obviously, Gary Dembo recently left the organization, so there has been some sort of shuffling in the Marlins front office. That will have an impact in the draft. But the draft is coming up. We're less than a week out from the draft. Our next episode, we will know who the Marlins have drafted, so we can talk about those guys and give our insights. Now, guys that the Marlins have already drafted, who are in the pipeline and who are maybe poised to help the team. We talked about the pitching last week. We want to focus on the hitting this week because the Marlins have really struggled of late. It feels like we're riding a roller coaster this year. Last week when we recorded, the Marlins were on a 6-game winning streak. Everything was looking great. They had pushed their way back into wild card contention. And now we're recording today. They're coming off 2 really terrible losses to the Pittsburgh Pirates. The offense has absolutely disappeared. Obviously, they don't have Jazz Chisholm in the lineup. They don't have Jorge Soler in the lineup. But still, the Marlins they've only averaged 2.3 runs per game since July 4th, and they've lost 5 out of their last 8 games over that stretch. So the offense is not producing at all. So you start to wonder, do the Marlins make a trade for a bat, or do they look to their minor league system? And we've talked about these guys, off and on throughout the year. So we just want to update everybody on what's going on with some of the more exciting hitting prospects that the Marlins have. So I'm going to start at the AA level. We've talked about these guys recently. Paul McIntosh, he's probably not going to help the Marlins this year, but somebody to watch in the not too distant future. He's hitting .258. He's got 8 homers, 38 RBI. His 18 doubles are 5th in the Southern League at the moment. We've talked also about Troy Johnston, who has been one of the better bats in the Southern League this year. He's hitting .293 with 8 homers, 15 doubles. Really, really talented hitter. And then the guy that we've talked about on more than one episode, Mr. Marlin's son, Griffin Conine. He's probably been the most exciting prospect among the hitters at the AA level. He's hitting .253. He's got a .838 OPS, 13 homers, 45 RBI. He gets on base at a .376 clip, although he does strike out at a really high rate, 35.3% of the time. But Conine, he's top 10 in OPS, homers, RBI, and on-base percentage in the Southern League right now. So he's being really, really productive for the Pensacola Blue Wahoos. That strikeout rate, though, also top 10. It's actually fourth highest in the Southern League. What do you got on some of these double-A hitters, Joe?
Yeah, we've been down that road, and with, like you say, with Griffin Conine, 13 homers and 45 or so RBIs. It's like he's a lot like Bleday.
Yeah,
their stature is similar, both lefty bats. Yes, they could play center a little bit, I guess, but pretty much corner is where they'd profile. I honestly, Dave, I think that there might be some trade interest in Griffin. So I wouldn't be shocked, if there's some sort of package deal, if there's a couple of teams out there, if you're making a deal and you're looking for another piece, I could see Griffin being part of that. Johnston, we talked about before, that more of that, pure hitter, more of a hit tool. We don't know how the power will play, especially in a big ballpark like Lone Depot, but good solid bat to ball skills. And those are, like, McIntosh is a good story, but we'll be dealing more with him. I don't think he's more of the now. A year from now, I'm sure we're going to get to AAA in a minute, but that's kind of my feeling. I'm curious to see, because they got to make a trade or two, and I anticipate they will. And some of these guys are going to have to go, and you would think, because you have Rule 5, you have only X amount of 40-man spots, and so that's kind of my thinking, because I do see a little carbon copy with Bleday, and you're probably going to give JJ every opportunity to see what he can do. So that's kind of my thoughts on Griffin right now.
Yeah, as you said, I think the biggest hurdle that the Marlins have in the near future is that Rule 5 draft, because they have a ton of prospects spread out between AA and AAA, both hitters and pitchers, that are going to be Rule 5 eligible come December. So they do have to make some moves to either clear out the 40-man or trade some of these guys off, or really risk losing them. Now, we've got 4 bats that we want to touch on here really quickly from the AAA level, and you mentioned one of them in J.J. Bleday. Now, these two guys, J.J. Bleday and Peyton Burdick, neither of them have hit the major league level yet, and neither of them are on the 40-man roster, although both of them will be Rule 5 eligible come December. Bleday, his batting average is obviously not as impressive as you'd like it to be. He's hitting .219 for the season. He's got an .805 OPS, which is a pretty healthy number. He has 18 homers on the year, which is second in the International League, 46 RBI. He's got 56 walks. Those 56 walks are third in the International League. He's got a .357 on-base percentage, which is a nice number, and he strikes out at about 27% of the time. As you mentioned, he has played a little bit of center field, but he probably profiles more as a corner outfielder, right field, left field. Really talented guy, first-round pick out of Vanderbilt. It's just the bat hasn't been as maybe consistent as you would like, but he's really starting to get hot with that home run stroke. He hit 9 homers in June. He hit one yesterday. So he's really sort of got it going from a production standpoint at this point. His outfield mate, Peyton Burdick, he's mostly played in center field lately. He's hitting .225, 757 OPS, 10 homers, 13 doubles, 38 RBI. He's got a 27% K rate as well. He is, he's got some big time power from the right-handed side. Bleday's obviously a left-handed hitter, but basically everything else about these two prospects kind of overlaps, other than the fact that one of them's a lefty and the other one's a righty. So what do you have on Bleday or Burdick, Joe?
Well, I got my right state shirt on for Peyton Burdick. I did that intentionally. Again, yeah, they're kind of like a right-handed and left-handed version of the same player, except for Burdick seems to be a little more athletic. Neither one has had the breakout year that you were hoping. Let's be honest. The power is one thing, but it's like just the overall hitting. I think the Marlins would have liked to see both of them performing at a higher level to be a little more sure bets, because they both kind of hit more in the bottom of the order, middle of the bottom, than middle of the top. Again, you're just kind of, the second half's going to be big for them. It's going to be big for them to kind of kick it into gear and to show more, because I don't think they're as close to, I think you're going to mention someone else, because I think the guy that probably should be up sooner than later is Lewin Diaz, who has 18 homers as well.
That's right.
62 RBIs, and would make the Marlins more athletic. Has already been in the big leagues, but we're there with Lewin and then Girard, and those are the two that, if you're talking about the more immediate impact with the Marlins, they're already on the 40-man. And who knows if Aguilar gets moved by the deadline, that could also clear the way for Lewin. But he's the guy I think that I personally want to start seeing up here and trying to get a real read on Lewin Diaz.
Yeah, absolutely. As you mentioned, both of these guys have played for the Marlins already this season. In fact, Lewin obviously even before that. Both are on the 40-man roster. Lewin has nothing left to prove at the minor league level. He's hitting 265 this season with an 838 OPS. He also has 18 homers, which, like Lede, are tied for second in the International League. His 62 RBI are fourth most in the International League. He's only striking out 20% of the time. He's obviously a sterling defensive first baseman, somebody that, he deserves a spot at the Marlins or with the Marlins at the major league level. And hopefully that happens sooner rather than later. And Girard, he kind of announced himself with that grand slam when the Marlins called him up earlier in the year, but he's actually scuffled since the Marlins have sent him down to Jacksonville. He's only hitting 226 with a 664 OPS, 6 homers, 15 RBI, and a 31.6% strikeout rate for him. So Encarnacion and Diaz, we sort of lump them together because they're on the 40-man. They've made appearances for the Marlins. We're likely to see both of them again at some point this season with the Marlins. And depending on how this season plays out, if the Marlins sort of fade here as we move through the summer, these guys absolutely deserve a little bit more playing time, at the major league level than what they got previously, because the Marlins need to know what they have in these prospects. And Lewin has been in the minors, forever. He has so many at bats. You've mentioned, number of at bats in the past. He's well past several thousand at bats. I think at this point, so the Marlins need to know what they have in these guys and to give them a shot. And it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
Yeah, no doubt. And the Girard kind of going a little sideways to backwards, going down, little disappointing. But I wonder though, because I've seen players do this. They perform really well. They go to the big leagues, have a taste of it, even have a moment or two. They go back down thinking their mind's already in the big leagues, and then their numbers start drifting at the minor league level. So you just hope that whatever it is, Girard simplifies things. We know that all he has to do is put the bat in the ball. Just don't strike out a bunch, and he's going to have numbers. And you just kind of hope that he's doing that there. Like you say with Lewin, he's kind of me personally, in 20 years on this beat, seen the Marlins rush tons of prospects. They don't fully develop. Lewin's about as the little oven bell has gone off, and then it's like they just don't open the door and let him out. It's done. He's
overcooked.
He's going to be overcooked. That's the only thing that's going to happen with him. So we kind of hope for his sake, which we want to see it. And I do like lefty power at our ballpark here in South Florida because it plays a little bit better. But as we kind of get out of here, there's somebody who's kind of been the star, and he's been their best prospect. And he's going to be going to the futures game and lead us into how we're going to end this show.
Our buddy Yuri Perez, we've talked about him quite a bit this year. He was named to the futures game. He's the only Marlins prospect to make it to the futures game. He said this in May, if I can make it to the futures game, that's one of my dreams right now. Well, he has accomplished this dream. He has made it as a 19-year-old pitching at the AA level. There were some questions about whether or not that might have been too aggressive a placement for him early on, and that might have been the case because his first 3 starts with the Blue Wahoos weren't, incredible, but in his last 10 starts with the Blue Wahoos, a 198 ERA, only 11 earned runs over 50 innings pitched. He's got 69 strikeouts, only 9 walks, a 166 batting average against. 70% of his pitches have gone for strikes. Just incredibly impressive, and we wanted to give our props to Yuri Perez for making the futures game.
Yeah, and it gives a reason, I hope he starts it. Everyone's
Yeah.
saying start Sandy in the All-Star game. So let's do our campaign. Start Yuri in the futures
Yuri.
game. And let's hashtag
Absolutely.
Yuri, start Yuri. Congratulations. Kudos to the organization on handling him. We tend to, in the organization, they kind of tend to take some heat for those that don't always pan out. This is a really big feather in the cap to development, scouting. They got a real prize here. And when you hear me talk a lot about the word impact, because that's what wins at the big league level. That's what it looks like, my friend. And all the best to Yuri. And I hope the experience there does to Yuri what when Sandy in 2019 went to his first All-Star game. He kind of came back with a new appreciation because he was around the dudes. When you're around that changes you. You see, That's how it looks like. That's what you want to be. And this is a taste of it. He's got Dodger Stadium. What a way to your first really big league ballpark you're throwing in is Dodger Stadium. That's great for him and all those great future stars that are going to be there as well. We'll be watching, somewhere I'm going to be tuning that in, whether I'm at the Marlins game Saturday or not. But everyone tune into that. The draft is Sunday. Make sure, David, tell everyone how they can find us. It's going to be a fun, next 5 days for baseball, and we'll be back doing more of it. But obviously, subscribe, what we're doing, and take us out of here, David.
Yeah, absolutely. Next week, for our episode next week, we will fill you in on everything that happened during the MLB draft. You can find us here on the 5 Reasons Sports YouTube channel. You can, if there's a prospect that you'd like us to discuss, you can comment below. You can tag us on social media. You see my Twitter handle right there at @DL Fernandez. Joe is at Joe Frisaro or at Man-on-2ND. Reach out. We'll talk about whomever it is that you'd like us to mention and really sort of unpack it and get into it. Make sure you check out dugoutmugs.com/Man-on-2ND to get your hands on one of these spectacular drinking vessels. You can get it in the traditional wooden bat, or the aluminum that Joe has. If you buy it using that link, that helps us out, obviously. And we thank you for that. We'll be back next week. We'll be back next Wednesday, probably. And again, we'll recap what happened in the draft. We'll look at what's going on with the Marlins. Are they buyers or sellers with the trade deadline looming at that point? We'll have a much clearer picture, I guess, come this time next week. But anyway, for Joe Frisaro, I am David Fernandez. Thank you for watching, everybody.